Today I'm going to help you walk through chapter 5. It is a bit long, so I'm going to try to truncate some things and give you some things to think about, um, and basically try really hard not to read the book to you. I really am impressed with Dr. Vaughn's use of um, wording and phrasing and all that, so I like to read his words, but that's okay. Um, we will get through it anyway. So I know you're not going to watch a whole hour and a half video or something like that. So I'm going to try to get this done in about 40 minutes. So, okay, so chapter 5 is media manipulation, fake news, bias, and advertising. And in this chapter, we're going to add two more big words. I'm sorry, three, I can't count. Three more big words to our list. We have one more for this section, and that'll come in chapter 7. But anyway, fake news. I think this is something that we all need to be aware of all the time. So that's why it's a big word. Um, fake news is deliberately false or misleading news stories that masquerade as truthful reporting. So these are things that really shouldn't be, right? Fake news. Don't we have enough going on in the world without having to manufacture stuff on the side? But um, they are not jokes. They are not parody. They are not sarcasm. They are something that looks like legitimate reporting, but it's totally fabricated. So it's very underhanded and awful. Um, a couple of things about media bias. Um, bias in general here is, but we're talking mostly about media, and by media I mean anything you can see, right, or hear. You have all kinds of stuff coming at you all day long. Sometimes it's a good idea just to unplug everything and be for a little bit. But anyway, bias is a distorted and unfair perspective caused by the values of the writer or editor. And so bias isn't necessarily just stuff we don't agree with. Now, feel free to disagree with biased reporting, okay? But just because you disagree with something doesn't mean that it's biased. It also doesn't mean it's fake news. So we have to be careful about calling things out. The last one here is objectivity in journalism is ensuring that the story exhibits no explicit or implicit preference for one set of values over another. And this is what we say we want, right? We want our news to be just the facts. So this is what objectivity is. And it's saying that it exhibits no explicit, they didn't say it out loud, they didn't imply it, and it's any of that preference of one set of values over another. That's bias. Now, it's not always necessarily wrong, but it's bias, so we have to think about it. Okay, the last one is advertising. The last section is advertising. And really, we have to be skeptical of anything we see that's portrayed as an ad, whether it's for a product or a service or a politician or whatever, because advertisements are meant to basically make us do something we wouldn't do on our own. Okay, so we're going to get there. Okay, this particular thing on the internet, our ability to find information on anything is nearly limitless. But what we get sometimes is not really what we asked for, and sometimes we don't know that it's not what we asked for. Okay, and I am going to read this a little bit here. A massive share of that information is suspect, false, misleading, self-serving, biased, and crazy. Okay. The other thing is, okay, I knew that a bot was a computer program masquerading as a human. I didn't know that a sock puppet, that's an interesting visual, isn't it? A sock puppet is a real person assuming fake identities. Okay, so, and I've heard this called lots of other things. So on the internet, you can be talking to somebody who says they are, you know, they're a 21-year-old male with a college degree. They could be a 12-year-old female in her bedroom, or they could be a 40-year-old whatever. Okay, so just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. Should be, but it's not. Okay. So new media has given us tools to unify the world through open and respectful discussions about shared values and, yeah, cat videos, right? But there are all kinds of problematic issues there. Filter bubbles, which I've also heard called echo chambers, when you only get the news and ideas that you like or that you agree with. Okay. So this first section, media manipulation, internet technology makes it easy to post things and have them read by a bunch of people. Sometimes maybe it's only 20 or 30, other times it's 20 or 30,000. Some of these go into millions. A little scary. The sources of information and delusion, okay, we as human beings are lazy. Lazy in our thinking, lazy in what we do. We want to do as little as possible for the most money, mostly. We also want things that make us comfortable, things that make us happy, things that make us smile. And not all of those things are worth looking at. Okay. We've already talked a little bit about, back in, I think it's chapter 2, confirmation bias. Okay. We tend to look for things that agree with what we already know, or what we already think, or what we already like. And sometimes that's okay, but other times confirmation bias, if that's all you're looking at, you're getting a skewed picture, regardless of how right your position is. Not everybody is going to agree with absolute truth either. So, confirmation error, confirmation bias, sorry, availability error, things that are shocking or exciting or wow, those kinds of things, we tend to put more stock in them than we should. And then, again, we hear this homophily. Homophily is, I like what my friends like. Okay, we like the same things. It's kind of why we're friends. But we have to be careful on, especially on social media, of not just liking things because our friends posted it, or liking things because they seem, wow, exciting. There's a lot of things out there that are fake news, are incorrect, are biased, all that, and we can pass them along and make the problem even worse. So, Singer and Brooking have a book called Like War, it's a likes war, right? The weaponization of social media. Homophily, we respond to it, we like the content, it goes out to more of our friends, they like the content, it goes out to more of their friends, and, we can end up with virtual pandemics of false and misleading content. Okay. This idea of a filter bubble, we do it without being conscious that we're doing it, in that we like the things we like. And so that's kind of a funny thing, but they're comfortable, reassuring spaces, but they can have serious downsides. We don't look at contrary evidence. We don't look at opposing views. We just want to see things that make us feel better. And again, sometimes necessary. Other times, it's a little bit scary. You can be so far down that, what we call the rabbit hole, of course, that you don't realize that what you're looking at and what you're liking is actually incorrect. Okay. So the other thing here, okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about, in chapter 4, about experts, and you can't be an instant expert. You can't be a general expert. You can't be an expert in 20 different fields, okay? And so we tend to pass these things along, and they're not good. We're going to be adding to the trouble. Okay, the big deal. Fake news. Deliberately false or misleading news stories that masquerade as truthful reporting. And this deliberately false or misleading, they're lies, okay? And we're going to get to a little bit of a comparison contrast here in a minute. Fake news is bad for intelligent discourse. It's bad for the pursuit of knowledge, for sane politics, and it's bad for democracy. When we have fake news and we can't tell the difference, now it used to be, back in my day, no, it used to be that if somebody was going to override or dub or use one thing and say another, it was fairly obvious because the technology was not as good at, the editing technology was not as good as the actual capture technology. Well, now we've kind of gone to the other direction. The capture technology is fine, right? Anybody, cell phone, the webcam, whatever, you can make a video, move on. It's very easy to manipulate video and pictures and all kinds of things. And so that's been put into the ta-da. And it's hard to get it back. Say somebody doctors a video and puts it out there as news. Here's the news today. Well, it's not really news. It's not really the news. It's a fake thing set to cause trouble between groups of people or cause problems for, you know, a particular agency or whatever, and it makes a lot of our stuff fall apart. It's very dangerous, and we kind of laugh about it sometimes, but it's very dangerous to the way we think as a whole because so much of that gets proliferated and we can't get rid of it. Okay, conspiracy theories, all kinds of things that way. The 2016 fake news attack orchestrated by the Russian government. And this part is not a conspiracy theory. There's proof, there's evidence, okay? The Center for Information Technology and Society at UC Santa Barbara says, you know, during and after the 2016 election, Russian agents created fake accounts on Facebook and put a whole bunch of stuff up there that was pro-Trump and anti-Clinton. And so there's a lot of mess there. They paid Facebook for advertisements. And so far, the U.S. Congressional Intelligence Committees responsible for investigating fake news have released 3,500 of these advertisements to the public. So it was not just one little thing. So we have this idea that our news is correct, and it's a pervasive one, but that's why this fake news is such a bad influence, is because we don't know. We're used to accepting the news as true, and it's not always, okay? A couple of ideas, the examples here. One is what they call Pizzagate. This young man from North Carolina went to Washington, D.C. because he fell victim to fake news in the way of a Twitter post, okay, a tweet. I don't know what they call it on X now, but anyway, a tweet. And he believed that this fake news, which was from a white supremacist who was targeting things against the Democrats and Hillary Clinton in specific, and said that they were running a sex trafficking ring of children out of this pizzeria basement. So he shows up with guns and fires his guns to scare people. And of course, it's not true. There was no sex trafficking ring. They definitely weren't in the pizzeria. And he ended up going to jail for a few years. So, the other parts of fake news are things like miracle cures for whatever. And they play on people's, they play on people's hearts because you think, oh, my mom has cancer. And, oh, did you read this? Did you see this? Do this, da da da. And there are tons of things out there. And you're so desperate for any kind of answer or any kind of relief that you buy into it, sometimes to the tune of thousands of dollars. And these folks that made the claim and have the site, they're just making money hand over fist because people are desperate and they want this cure. Well, it's not real. Jonathan Swift, in 1710, said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can put on its boots." These days, halfway around the world? How about around the world 3 times? Okay, so at the bottom of 151, Dr. Vaughn starts with fake news has these elements, is like these things, but it's also different. And so he has a whole list here. Lies, fake news involves deliberate deception. It is a lie, okay? It's not, and a lie is not the same thing as a mistake or an error. A lie is, as you know, a lie is something you tell to deliberately mislead, whether for your benefit or somebody else's. Propaganda is designed to promote a political cause or point of view. It is different from fake news, but propaganda can use fake news. Opinions are not fake news unless they move on to deliberate attempt to deceive, okay? Bias is not necessarily fake news, but it can easily devolve into that, okay? A hoax is a lie intentionally fabricated to appear truthful and to gain an advantage, whether it's financial or otherwise, or to provoke a reaction. All kinds of hoaxes, internet hoaxes, financial and health hoaxes, urban legends, email hoaxes, that kind of stuff. Satire is the use of irony, exaggeration, or sarcasm to expose or ridicule people's vices or folly. Websites like The Onion, they are hysterical in some ways, but some people, because they get posted kind of randomly, people take them as true, and then you have to look at the small print. So we say, oh, it's from The Onion. They're just being sarcastic. Okay. Now, how do we tell fake news from real news? Critical thinking, of course. This idea of reasonable skepticism. Okay, I almost made this a big word, but it's okay. Reasonable skepticism, it entails that we give up the habit of automatically accepting claims in the media. Do not believe a claim unless there are legitimate reasons for doing so. And so reasonable skepticism makes us go, anytime we see a claim that doesn't have any evidence around it. And there are some illegitimate reasons for accepting or rejecting claims. There are times when it's perfectly rational to believe a claim just because a source says it's true. But that attitude is appropriate only when you have previously verified the reliability of the source by checking for legitimate reasons supporting the source's claims. Whenever somebody says, oh, da-da-da-da-da, this is the thing, and you're like, what are the legitimate reasons for your view? Okay. And even though a good critical thinker is prepared to believe almost anything, given enough good reasons, we have to be careful and a little bit skeptical when we see things out there and say, okay, what are the reasons for this? I like it, or wow, that's awful. What are the reasons for this? Okay. There are 4 things that you can use to overcome the influence of fake news. One is to read laterally. Basically, go to the website, you're looking at it, and you're like, okay, what is this website? Who owns it? And then go look and see what their reputation is. Okay. And he gives a really interesting study that was done, I think Stanford, maybe not. Anyway, so this research, it had 10 historians, 25 Stanford undergraduates, that's where I get that from, and 10 professional fact checkers evaluated these 2 websites. They're very similar in name. They look like they would be, kind of competing sources, but they're not. The American Academy of Pediatrics is a legitimate website. It is the official governing body of pediatricians. They have their flagship journal comes from them, and all of that. The other one is the American College of Pediatricians. It's a splinter group that left the American Academy of Pediatrics because they didn't believe that gay couples should be able to adopt. So they're over here with their own agenda. And every fact checker unreservedly viewed the Academy site as more reliable. Historians were about 50-50, and the college students thought, oh, this one is better. The college one is better. So it's all kinds of interesting, but you can read that and see how we go. So when we read laterally, you can quickly do at least 3 things. Determine who is really behind the information you're seeing, uncover the purpose or motivation behind the information, and then find out how credible the source of information is. The second thing we do to tell fake news from real news is to read critically, okay? Now we know there are 4 basic tenets when we accept or reject claims. Accept claims that are supported independently by reliable authorities, evidence, other claims that you know to be true. Accept claims that are adequately supported by the source itself through citations and such. Reject claims when there is good reason for believing them false, and suspend judgment on claims that you're unsure of because it's unreasonable to accept or reject a claim if you don't have enough information to go on. Okay, now here are the key questions to ask when you're reading critically. Are the claims plausible? Basically, do they make sense? Can they be? The second one is, what is the support for the claim? And the third one is, have reliable fact-checking organizations examine the claims. Okay. 3, use Google and Wikipedia carefully. Now, I will tell you as a writing instructor, college writing instructor, I don't let my students cite Wikipedia, but I tell them to go use Wikipedia to get started. And so Google searches and things, make sure you understand what Google does so that you can weed through those first few sources and get down to something that's something you actually want to look at. Even better, search with Google Scholar. That helps a bit. And there's some tips there as well. As far as Wikipedia goes, again, it's a good place to start your research project because they have lists and lists and lists of sources that are used by experts in the field or written by experts in the field even. And last, check your own biases. Make sure you're not calling something fake news because you don't like it. That's your only reason for saying it's fake news. Go look it up. Make sure that what you're not liking is also not true. Okay. Media bias. Down to the third one. Media bias is a really long. Okay, so we have a few things. Media bias, and I've always thought this was hysterical. Folks who are on the conservative side of things say the media has a liberal bias, always has. People who are on the liberal side of things says media has a conservative bias, always has. Okay, they can't both be true. They're totally oppositional. So where's the truth? It's harder to see than you think. Objectivity and bias. Okay, objectivity, truthful telling, involves, among other things, accuracy, completeness, objectivity, and lack of bias. And he goes into some details on what is accurate, what is complete, what does that mean in news, which is what we're looking at, right? And why is objectivity so hard? Well, because we're human, right? There are lots of things, even people who are, they're highly ethical, they're trying their best to be objective, they're still human beings. They still have a heart, they still have interests and issues and all of that. And so it's very difficult to be totally objective, okay? The other thing about what we think about as objectivity is it means you have to rely on sources that might be complicit in the wrongdoing. And so we have to be very careful what we look at, how we look at it. It's very difficult, but fortunately, journalists have adopted a more reasonable notion of objectivity. To present a story objectively entails writing and organizing the material so as not to express or suggest a preference for one set of values over another. Okay. Fairness does not always entail giving equal weight to the views of those on either side of an issue. Some views might be absurd, uninformed, framed and calculated to political ends, and so on. So balance entails more than, a mechanistic measuring of words so that each partisan position is given an equal number of inches, minutes, or representation. And then he goes on and talks about objectivity in journalism, ensuring that the story exhibits no explicit or implicit preference for one set of values over another. And so for working on objectivity, we have to try to avoid bias, a distorted and unfair perspective caused by the values of the writer or editor. Okay? Even when their values and our values and their bias and our bias are the same, it's still bias. Okay? He gives us a lot of really good websites to go check. Media Bias Fact Check. That helps a lot. Okay, procon.org. The other thing about news bias is a lot of times we get biased reporting when they try to take things out of context. It's kind of a weird little guy. When we're thinking about emotional and evaluative kind of wording, we're talking about an aspect of rhetoric. And in this way, we have two different things that are working. So the denotation of a word, you probably already know this, is the dictionary definition, right? This is the agreed upon definition of the word by people who use the language as their native language, okay? And then there's connotation, the emotional baggage that some words, most words, carry along with them, okay? And he gives some other pieces there. Evaluative words are not always indicative of bias. They can be, violence, denounce, criticize, da-da-da. There's a whole thing here. It's very fun. Very fun. That's my, The next piece of this is opinion, analysis, and advocacy. Those are all different things. They can be kind of interwoven, but they are different things. News analysis is a kind of opinion writing consisting of examination, interpretation, or explanation of news events. It includes facts plus opinions about those facts. It's not a bad thing. It's not, doesn't have to be fake news. News becomes biased when it introduces inaccuracies and unfairness caused by the writer's values. Sometimes we have to hear things more than once in order to really kind of internalize and buy them. And with social media, that's not a problem, right? How many times have you gone through your news feed, and it seems like every other post is an ad for something. We have all kinds of jokes about this at home, but anyway, advocacy journalism is opinion writing for a cause. And so journalists would want you to know about this cause. And so they would write a piece about it. And it's factual and true, but it also has their opinion in there. So it's good, but it has downsides. Yeah. Partisan media bias, liberal and conservative bias. Whichever side of the spectrum you're on, more closely, maybe you're a middle of the road person. It's hard to be middle of the road these days, I think. But liberal and conservative, they both say the same thing about the other party. That's just how it works. They can't both be right. There's an interesting little quiz. I wish the answers were somewhere else. But anyway, can you tell the difference between fact and opinion on page 168? It's a good little measurement there, kind of fun. So presidential elections are, in this country, interesting things. When I was growing up, I don't know, when I was a lad, well, I was never a lad. When I was young, I don't remember the year plus long election cycle. It was always January, people announced. April, we voted in the primaries to pick, who was running for the Democrats, who was running for the Republicans, who was running for the other things, but I don't remember. I wasn't aware of those things back then. I have since been on that other end. So anyway, and then they had the summer and the fall for election time, and we voted in November. Now you have people putting their hats in the ring, 2 years out, and I don't know. I think that's a little bit much, but anyway, all kinds of fun things. So the last piece of this is advertising. Advertising is the practice of calling the public's attention to something in order to induce them to buy products or services or otherwise change their opinions or behavior. Advertising is like air. It's everywhere, okay? And it works, okay? This is why companies, businesses, politicians spend billions of dollars, and that's not an exaggeration, because it works. And we're coming up on one of those, well, at least while I'm making this video, we're coming up on the Super Bowl. And Super Bowl commercials are the pinnacle of cost, but also impact. And you'll see all kinds of interesting things there. Again, whenever you see something in an ad, you have to put on that reasonable skepticism. Okay, I know they're trying to get me to buy something, whether that's an idea or a product or a service. They want me to buy something. Okay, is it a good idea or not? Used to tease that my dad had no sales resistance in lots of things. My family was not well off, okay, by any stretch of the imagination. But my dad bought a set of encyclopedias from the salesman who would come around, the traveling salesman. We don't have that so much anymore. And then set of encyclopedias. When I was in kindergarten, I'm the oldest. Okay. They came in handy, though, when I was in second grade because I was homesick for most of the year. And I read the encyclopedias because that's what we had at home. It worked out. He bought a Kirby vacuum cleaner. This is in the 70s, early 70s, and he spent $300 on a vacuum cleaner. I don't spend $300 today on a vacuum cleaner. My little Bissell works just fine. It was $89. I'm very happy. And he bought a car as is. It was beautiful. This red Chevy station wagon. I know how his station wagon would be beautiful, but it was. It was really nice. And it had a 454 engine, but it turns out they put a 385 transmission in it. We were on our way to West Virginia to visit my grandparents, and the transmission basically fell out in the pan. No sales resistance. Okay. Remember, we should not believe a claim unless there are legitimate reasons for doing so. Okay. A general wariness of advertising employees is justified. And then we go into this lovely old school advertising tricks. Identification. This is the beer ad. All the people in it are beautiful. They're having a great time. Most of the guys have their shirts off. Most of the girls have most of their shirts off. And it's set up so, oh, if you're going to drink, if you want to be like these people, you have to drink this beer. Okay. That's the identification. Slogans and jingles, things that stick in your head. You know, misleading comparisons. Anytime they give you percentages and don't tell you where they got their percentages from, 30% better. All those kind of things. Interesting. And then weasel words. Things that are, say, it might work. Okay. Weasel words water down a claim in subtle ways, just enough to ensure that it is technically true, but superficially misleading. You may have already won. And then internet advertising. This is the biggie, right? Internet advertising is like the ocean. There may be a lot of things to see on the surface, but most of the action, power, and danger are down below. When we look at micro-targeting and algorithms and paid search ads and all that kind of fun stuff. Micro-targeting is interesting. Okay, so like most things that people get a hold of, it started off fairly, I mean, for advertising, fairly innocently, in that it would use what your browsing history was and what you liked and disliked and things on. Sorry, I just had people open the door. What you have liked before, bought before, and could give you ads for things based on those preferences. And then micro-targeting is constantly tweaking algorithms so that the ad that I see is tailored to me. You may see an ad for the same person or idea or product, but it'll be specifically tailored to you, and it'll be different from mine. It can be diametrically opposed to the one I just saw. And this is a big problem in elections. So anyway, we'll get to that in Chapter 6. Internet advertising, paid resources, social media ads, display ads, and something called native advertising. It's paid advertising designed to imitate the tone, style, and look of a publication's editorial or journalistic content. You don't realize it's an ad. So that's hard. So all kinds of interesting things here. You have the new guys here, right? And you have the summaries, and then you have the exercises at the end. So I hope that helps you with Chapter 5. I know I sped through very quickly, but otherwise it's slogged down and get involved in 2 more hours of stuff. So anyway, let me know if you have questions. You know how to get a hold of me. You have my email. Okay.